more radical utopianism in the later part of the 19th and all the 20th century. A more radical utopianism that was not out to meet a given need in the particular situations, but that had a universal solution for the need, an idealistic solution for the need, by eradicating, as it were, all cold water flats. And if that means that people had to be killed or driven out of town, well, so be it. At least we don't have any more cold water flats. It was a utopian vision. Now, mind you, I don't think anybody thought that way, but that's what the utopian vision would be. It was a radical overthrow of the established order of the human reality, of neighborhoods, of political structures, of ideas that marks the 20th century. That's when what Camus describes in his book, in his play, The Just Assassins. You find it in a collection marked Caligula. There are 5 plays in there. I read it once with students at King's College. In French, it's Les Justes. Well, the upshot of the story is that an archduke has to be killed in order to further the revolution. It was back in the 1805, 1806 Russian Revolution when the 1905, 1906, when for the first time Russia really had a parliament that was trying to function, and then the prime minister was shot. And they were trying to kill one of the leaders, the archduke, I think, of the Tsarist family. And just as the person is ready to throw the bomb under the carriage, he notices that there are 2 children sitting in the carriage with the archduke, and he refuses to throw the bomb. The particular situation, it demands the moral response to cut back, as it were, your ideal solution you had in mind, to deal with the reality. These are 2 innocent children. And he comes back to the group, and the group is furious at him because he's abandoned the pursuit of the utopian in favor of the particular situation in which a moral action would undermine what had been envisaged as utopia now. And that becomes the picture of much of what we know of as 20th century utopianism. Lenin and Stalin and what they accomplished with their insistence on the utopian idea of industrialization of Russia, the collectivization of the agriculture that killed more than 5 million Ukrainians through starvation. And then Stalin's show trials and the labor camps, called by many internal colonialism. Stalin came up with many of the labor camps after Lenin had talked, I think it was Lenin, having talked with Rosa Luxemburg, raising the question of how did Western countries become so wealthy? And the answer Rosa Luxemburg gave is because they had colonies, and they took the resources from there and manufactured at home and sold the stuff more expensively abroad. And it's colonial. You need colonies. And Russia looked around, Stalin looked around, and there was no more areas in which they could colonize. The last bits of Africa had been taken by Italy. And even Japan had at one point toyed with the idea of turning Ethiopia into a Japanese colony because the British were so successful with their colonies. But for Stalin, there wasn't anything left. And so Stalin did a job of internal colonization. That is, he robbed the resources of its own country by the labor of its own citizens to sell it to himself and to the remaining Russians. So when I went to Russia and everybody said, communism gave us cheap rents, free medicine, free education, we lived so much better. The bread was always cheap, etc., and we had time to have vacations to the Black Sea once every 5 years, and now we don't. I always pointed out to them that that isn't what the state paid for, that's what the state stole from all those it exploited in the labor camps. It did practice colonialism on its own people. Used the imposition of an idea, industrialization on basically agrarian culture, industrial organization on a culture that had not gone through the gradual awakening of human responsibility through education, through science, etc. A culture that had been under the hands of so much superstition and backwardness for centuries, and never awoken to the independent responsibility that a citizen has in a country, and thus to force an image on the culture, on the society, with the party as playing God and its history, its creativity, its destructive creativity seen as the manifested destiny for its country, Stalin and Lenin killed between 60 and 80 million people in the name of their utopia. And then there was Hitler, who for some understandable reasons, to reverse, for instance, the shame of Versailles Treaty, accusing Germany of having started the war when everybody started, in a nasty conflagration of first cousins sending their little armies, like on a map, with monopoly houses, here monopoly people into the battlefield. Reversing that Treaty of Versailles with its harsh and impossible reparation agreements, he picked up on the whole notion that we will show the world that we are a particular people, a unique people, a better people. He picked up on the anti-Semitism that was widespread as a European disease, not as a German, but as a wide European disease. England, France, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, Poland were all anti-Semitic. But Germans did it with the efficiency of a Mercedes-Benz. And scientifically justified, killed more than 6 million of them because they wanted to create a new mankind, just like Stalin wanted to create a new non-bourgeois human race. The idea, the image, purity, the image of a society without envy, where everybody has according to their needs, the image was imposed on a tragic reality of real human beings who are individuals, never perfect, always a surprise, and to be respected as made in the image of God, not as tools for the advancement of a program. Eugenics was part of that program, and not only in Germany, with the testing of human beings, of how long they could survive in icy waters, or what would happen to them when you inject all kinds of medication in prisoners and handicapped people and Jews and everybody else that was not part of the party. It was also widespread here in this country. I saw a letter from a colleague of mine of a man at the university, a professor at the University of Minnesota, who in 1929 wrote a letter to Hitler praising him for his eugenics experiments. After all, you know, when progress is the only concern and the manifestation of the divine purpose, why then, of course, you want to work on the improvement of human beings, not medically, but by the elimination of all that which is a hindrance to find or to arrive at the image of a perfect human being. And remember what I said last time, wasn't it interesting that the Greeks, with their utopianism, with their idealism, worked on the ideal proportions of a human body? And don't you find a reflection of that also in the idea of, we know what a perfect human race would look like. We can manipulate eugenics in such a way that we will only have the fit survive. Without the outer reference, the reference to outside of history, the way the Bible gave to the Jews and to the Christians, where our concerns should be creative, yes, but with moral limitations that stand higher and more solid than any majority, any historic situation, any whatever natural phenomenon. Without that, nothing stands in the way of any of these programs being practiced. One can go on and must go on with Mao, who in the pursuit of a truly Chinese new Marxist society practiced to institute at first the Great Leap Forward, with a steel mill in everybody's backyard, as if that were economically sensible, and then with a cultural revolution. I urge you to watch sometime the film from my teenagers, some music teachers, and enjoys them and then teaches them a few things because he admires the technical skill of these violinists, 10-year-olds who don't miss a note, but who don't say anything. And he says, you know, you've got to tell me something. You've got to put emotions yourself into the music. This is not just the accuracy of the vibrations of the string that matter. This is a speech, a language that wants to communicate something to me. But what Mao did with the Great Leap Forward is precisely that you abandon all references to a larger humanity in pursuit of the ideal that China would become. And it could only become that through the Cultural Revolution, that is the elimination of all Western music, all playing of Beethoven, all discussion, all variation in the music, all affirmation that after all the performance of a musical section is a conversation between the composer and the musician, and then between the musician and the audience, and then on Tuesday it's different from the way it is on Thursday. And all that's lost unless again and again a person is affirmed that you are a unique being made in the image of God. You could be a great pain, but you're also a great surprise. And all of history and its direction depends to some extent on the choices you make, and you must make them. And failing to make a choice is also factual in history. I can go on with Mao and the people he killed. Again, 60, 70 million, 15 million in the Great Leap Forward, and then many more in the Cultural Revolution, when whole populations were moved across the countryside in pursuit of an idiotic and finally inhuman ideal. Gandhi must be added to that as well. Gandhi, who went back to India and in rejection of everything the British had brought, or much of what the British had brought, introduced economic development by putting a spinning wheel in every hut, in every home, which is no way to produce cotton. Yes, the British had not treated the Indian and specifically the Bengali cotton industry very well. They had forbidden them to make the fine cotton cloth for which they are known, because they wanted to make it in Manchester for a while. But to replace that wrong with another wrong does not improve the situation. But in the name of Indian nationalism, Gandhi advocated a hideous situation which retarded the economic and human development of India by several decades. Shall I mention Pol Pot as well? Pol Pot, the Cambodian leader who destroyed 1.6 million people, all those who were thinking for themselves, who had had employment in the previous government, who were teachers. I had a friend who's married to a Cambodian who had been married before. She and her husband were confronted by Kampuchean, by Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge agents, and to check what level of education and therefore what level of intellectual independence they had, they were given a piece of paper to read. And her husband read and was taken away and shot. And she recognized what was going on and turned the page upside down, pretending she could not read. And anybody who wore glasses was off anyway, because that shows they were interested in reading. And so 1.6 million people died in the name of re-education, in the name of a better humanity. It's a theory